let's start our side event. First of all, excuse us for this 10 minutes delay. We were dealing with a small technical issue. Distinguished colleagues, parties and non-parties, representatives, different stakeholders, on behalf of Adaptation Committee and Least Developed Countries Expert Group, I am happy to welcome you on our side event, which aim to present the interim results towards implementation of Paris Agreement mandates. As you well know, our groups were mandated by COP21 to work on 3 specific mandates contained in Decision 1 CP21, paragraphs from 41 to 45. I will be moderating this session on behalf of our 2 groups, which include myself, my Vice Chair, Sonam, and Dom and Mim Peng from Adaptation Committee. This will be a very interesting session with very nice presentations. But before that, I would say that during the presentations, please take notes as much you can, so that you provide the necessary feedback that the 2 groups are looking for to continue achieving the mandate that was given. We will be having 3 main moments. Opening this session, I will ask Adaptation Co-Chair Mim Peng Chen for your open remarks.
Thank you, Abies, and I would like to join my colleague Abies for welcoming you here to this joint event. And I'm very pleased to be part of the collaborative working group between the Adaptation Committee and the Least Developed Country Expert Group, the LAC, and the Standing Committee on Finance, the SCF. The AC is the overall advisory body for the adaptation to the convention. The LAG provides technical guidance and support to the formulation and implementation of national adaptation plans and other aspects of least developing countries work program. And also our collaboration is enhanced by the collaborating with the SCF, which assists the COP in exercising its function in relation to the financial mechanism of the convention. I would like to invite my colleagues from the AC, the LAG, and the SCF who are here to identify themselves by standing up. Thank you very much. The AC, the LAG, and the SCF would like to thank parties for entrusting us with contributing to developing the rulebook towards the implementation of Paris Agreement. And we very much look forward to sharing the recommendations starting from our joint work at next COP for the recommendation by CMA. So in today's events, we will present how we have been working constructively throughout the year on these important mandates, and we also looking forward to your suggestions and feedbacks. Thank you, and I look forward to a very constructive dialogue here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mim Peng, for your open remarks. I'll now like to give the floor to Beth Lavender. It's a LAG member, which will deliver the main presentation with the key findings so far. As I did request, please pay attention as much you can so that you are able to provide comments and feedback. Beth, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's on? It's open? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair and Co-Chair. And as you just heard, please pay attention so that you can provide your input at the end. We are very much looking forward and indeed counting on your reflections on what we've done to date and any feedback, any further suggestions for our work. So the general overview for the presentation I'm about to give will include a brief overview of the joint mandates, the approach we've taken so far to address those joint mandates, and the progress we've made, including some of our initial thinking and outputs that we've come up with so far. And then we will turn it over to you folks to provide your feedback, your impressions, and have hopefully an active discussion then, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the next steps are. So very quickly, just to overview the Paris Agreement and where to place it in context of where adaptation is discussed in the Paris Agreement. We of course have Article 7 dealing with adaptation, where paragraph 1 outlines the global goal on adaptation. Paragraph 3 talks about recognizing efforts of developing country parties on adaptation. Paragraph 5 gives us some guiding principles. 8 talks about cooperation. Paragraph 9, planning and implementation. Paragraph 10 on communication, 13 on support, and 14 on the global stocktake. Our joint mandates deal with paragraphs 3 and 13 for the most part. And I would also highlight that in addition to the mandates that were given jointly to the Adaptation Committee and the LAG, the adaptation was given additional mandates to work on their own. Those include review in 2017, the work of adaptation-related institutional arrangements under the Convention, with the view to identifying ways to enhance the coherence of their work as appropriate in order to respond adequately to the needs of parties, and to consider methodologies for assessing adaptation needs with a view to assisting developing country parties without placing an undue burden on them. So those are the 2 additional Adaptation Committee mandates that they have, but we will not be talking about those in detail. Here we'll be talking about the joint mandates. So these are the 3 joint mandates that were given to the Adaptation Committee and LAG. The first one is to develop modalities to recognize the adaptation efforts of developing country parties, and this comes from Article 7.3 of the agreement. The second one, where we're to work with the second and third ones, we are to work in collaboration also with the Standing Committee on Finance. The second one being to develop methodologies on taking necessary steps to facilitate the mobilization of support for adaptation in developing countries in the context of the global average temperature increase. And the third one is to develop methodologies on reviewing the adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support. So I'll talk a little bit about the approach that we've taken, so you know how we got to where we are today before I go into what we've come up with so far. So this whole UNFCCC is nothing without its processes. So this is the process that we followed. Step 1 in the second and third quarters of 2016 was all about gathering and synthesizing information relevant to the mandates, and this included through desk reviews, a call for submissions, and events such as the Adaptation Forum and NAP Expo, where we capitalized on a lot of people being in one place to gather some more information and reactions on these activities. Step 2 has been identifying, sort of weeding through that information and identifying a suite of possible methodologies and modalities and sort of options, and validating them through outreach to parties, including through side events such as this. And step 3, which has been happening iteratively, like these are not stepwise steps, they're iterative. So step 3, which has been happening since quarter 2 and will continue until the end of this year, well, until the end of the work that we're doing will be in selecting options and including them in recommendations to CMA. And I do want to reiterate again that this has been an iterative process where we're gathering information, getting feedback, and going and looking for more information if we need it, and adjusting our options as we go. So in the ways we've been working together, and I would say as a co-benefit of this, these joint mandates and this activity is one of the co-benefits, is that the Adaptation Committee and the LEG have really gotten to know each other better, and have sort of broken down a little bit of broken the ice in terms of our relationship, and we have developed a nice way of working, I think, through this exercise. So we've had a few joint meetings, both of the full AC and LEG, with SCF participation, and we established a joint working group, and there are 4 members from each of the bodies on this working group, and we do have SCF participation as well, so that this smaller group can get down and start to flesh out some of the options. We've been collecting information and views, again, as I said before, through the desk reviews and the submissions and the forum and the expo and side events. And we've been trying our best to be as transparent as possible. So the information that we have been gathering and summarizing, we are sharing through events like this, and there is information that has been published on the website as well. I guess there's a joint AC LEG web page that is providing more information on our process and on our outcomes to date. So this is where you really need to pay attention, because this is what we're asking you to provide your input on, and the progress that we've made. The initial options are being developed, taking into account the AC and the LEG in their capacity as experts, the submissions that we've called for in responses to that, and the desk review. In terms of submissions, we've had 5 party submissions. We have submission from the SCF, and then 8 non-party stakeholder submissions. Understanding the mandates and identification of options is evolving well for the first 2 tasks. It did, I must say, the first meeting we had, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could understand the mandates and what our best interpretation of them was, so that we could communicate this with parties and with you. Definitely more work is needed on the third task. That one we're finding a little bit more challenging. We are making progress, but certainly more input would be appreciated. And the key questions remaining on that one concern ways to aggregate local reviews of adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support, and long-term reporting on adaptation and support, and the monitoring and evaluation of adaptation and the role of adaptation, resilience indicators. So for the first mandate, here is what our general considerations have been on the first mandate. So in terms of what adaptations are, or how to define adaptation that should be recognized, that would include financial investments, processes and systems to enable or facilitate effective adaptation, outputs including, for example, a national adaptation plan or a strategy or other policy documents, and outcomes or demonstrable results. The purpose of recognition, based on the input we've received and our collective input, could be, and again, could be, I want to reiterate that these are our initial views, and we were really looking for your feedback before we make our final recommendations. So the purpose could be to enhance the profile of adaptation and provide visibility and recognition of each country's actions, to create an opportunity to receive credit and mobilize additional financial resources, to facilitate cooperation and promote coherence between the adaptation efforts of developing countries and incoming support from international partners, and to serve as key sources of inputs for the global stocktake. the information we think we could draw from, adaptation communications, and reports referred to in Article 3.8 of the Paris Agreement, the transparency framework. Modalities to recognize the adaptation efforts of developing country parties. Here are some initial options and suggestions. First modality could be in the global stocktake to create a space for a recognition event. And we did a little bit of a strengths limitations exercise here. And this is what our thinking has been. Strengths, high political visibility of adaptation efforts. Parties may get feedback that will help them improve their efforts, and it really an exchange of information and best practices in that forum. The limitations are only a limited number of parties may present their efforts at one particular session, so there is very real time constraints to this modality. Second might be a series of opportunities created during major events such as the Adaptation Forum or the NAP Expo. Strengths of that one we thought would be that it would increase the portfolio of best practices and lessons learned at these events. These events attract a lot of practitioners, parties, and experts from around the world. Limitations, not all parties are invited to these events, and there are also time constraints between the core business of these events and the recognition efforts. Third modality may be that CMA could review and compile and synthesize with a synthesis by the Secretariat of these adaptation efforts. Strengths include high political visibility of adaptation efforts, can easily be carried out by the Secretariat. There's already a solid base of information sources, NAP Central, the upcoming adaptation registry, the official country reports, and some limitation being that the activities are that are part of government-funded development programs that contribute towards adaptation are not usually adequately captured and documented, and therefore rarely reported in readily available and accessible reports. And diversity of sources could pose a challenge for synthesizing the information in a meaningful way. For the second mandate, this is the methodologies for taking the necessary steps to facilitate the mobilization of support for adaptation. We feel it's important to look at the provision and receiving of support. And by support, we mean finance, technology, and capacity building, taking into account the principles of country drivenness, equity, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in light of different national circumstances. There is a multitude of complementary approaches, including international, bilateral, and multilateral support, including enhanced access, domestic support, including streamlined resilience and climate risk considerations, and private sector support. And thirdly, support is needed throughout the adaptation policy cycle, from adaptation needs assessment and planning to the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So it is definitely an iterative and kind of a life cycle process that doesn't necessarily come to a final end. Some initial options we have come up with are step one, creating an enabler. So we came up with two steps that may be required within this mandate. And step one would include efforts to create enabling environments, including through development of policies and regulations, including the adoption of building codes, for example, land tenure laws, public-private partnerships, legislation, those kinds of things. Awareness raising and capacity building. And step two is the actual adaptation planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And this would include assessing support needs, including through a nationally determined assessment process, review existing support and gap analysis between existing support and estimated projected needs, assessing adaptation needs through implementing adaptation projects and programs, using dedicated multilateral, bilateral funds, and tracking of support and monitoring and evaluating how adaptation support needs are being addressed. On to the third mandate, and remember, this is the one where we recognize we need the most work. So this is the methodologies for reviewing the adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation support, referred to in Article 7.14. Which says the global stocktake will assess the collective progress towards achieving the purpose of the Paris Agreement and its long-term goals. Its outcome shall inform parties in updating and enhancing in a nationally determined manner their action and support, as well as enhancing international cooperation for climate action. So in terms of the purposes, these methodologies may serve multiple purposes, including national, subnational learning and usage of information, tracking progress, engaging adequacy of action, collective assessment complemented by individual level recommendations, adaptation tracking at a global scale. And the methodologies might be guided by the following principles: country-driven and managed, science is provided for under the mechanisms of the UNFCCC and IPCC, not placing an undue or additional burden on developing countries, and flexibility considering a wide range of contexts, and that adaptation may be a moving goal, and coherence with other processes such as the Sustainable Development Goals or the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Some initial options, again, these are initial options, that this is where we're looking for your feedback. At the national level, simple reporting of status of adaptation and support, or in-depth assessment through comprehensive monitoring and evaluation and tracking frameworks. At the international level, a central repository or compilation of national level information, compilation and analysis of national level information, or external in-country review of nationally provided information. And in the global stocktake, modalities to be developed by the ad hoc working group on the Paris Agreement, information provided by the national or international levels. So now we're at the point where we're turning it, I think I'm turning it back to you to moderate the discussion.
Thank you, Beth, for your excellent presentation. Please hold on just a minute. From here, I would like to invite our colleague from Standing Committee on Finance, Opang from Ghana, to have some words, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's a very brilliant presentation, and I thought all of us have heard of it, and we have realized what the Adaptation Committee has been doing with the least developed countries expert group, the successes that they have been able to chop, and also some of the challenges that they have been able to also face, and also the various methodologies has also been widely expressed. One area that as a standing committee, Mr. Chair, may I stand up?
Yes.
I like to stand up when I talk. Yeah, so one area that as a standing committee, we have been working with the LEG and the AC is to look at the level of financial flow with respect to adaptation programs, both at the global level and also at the national level. And I think what has been said is quite true. We have been using various methodologies to find out the level of financial flow with regard to adaptation programs. In the biannual assessment that the Standing Committee has undertaken, I think we made the presentation 2 days ago to the COP. And you realize that there have been a lot of funding from the north, that is from the developed countries to the developing countries. And that information has also been provided, even though, according to the report, there are some level of uncertainties. But what we have realized is that more information needs to be provided. And I think a forum like this, being hosted by the AC, And the leg is a very important forum for us to understand what is being done. And I think the standing committee cherish this form of forum for us to share ideas. So what I will say now is that, yes, much is being done to share information, much is being done to collect data, but more needs to be done to be able to work together so that at the end of the day, we can all do very well. I'm very particularly happy about the registry that is being expressed in the Paris Agreement. And I think a lot of information will be shared in that area so that we will know what is really happening, both at the international level and also at the national level. This is what I would like to say now. Mr. Chair, I think I've finished my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Standing Committee on Finance. Colleagues, we are now opening the floor. We are providing some additional questions, additional to questions that you have taken notes. Those are on board. We identify some specific areas that we like additional contributions, but we are willing to take all contributions that come from you, parties, non-parties, stakeholders. Among the questions that we identify, just I will read them quick. Whether the general reflections are consistent to the mandates. This is one. You have listened to each of mandates. Whether the initial options are consistent with the mandates. You have listened to mandates and also to the options that we provide, and we would like to have some feedback on that. Whether do you see gaps and how those gaps could be addressed. And the last one, where more technical work may be needed. As groups, we identify one and we told you, but the floor is open for your additional contributions. Who's breaking the ice? I said, oh, please, when you take the floor, identify yourself, your name, where you're coming from, and then address the group.
Sure. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's really helpful. My name is Michael Igo. I'm a journalist with DevEx. We're based in Washington, D.C. I guess I have a really basic question, and forgive me if it's an overly simple one, but as part of your mandate, is there some effort to sort of draw some clearer lines or parameters around what adaptation is versus, development actions or climate smart development or sort of these other categories of interventions? Or are you working off of a definition that someone else has provided? I guess I'm just wondering, if part of what's going to happen is that countries will arrive at a place and sort of demonstrate the work that they've been doing under the headline of adaptation, what's the process in place to make sure that they're sort of talking about similar things? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I've seen a hand that side, no? Oh, yes, Maggie White from the back. Good.
Yes, thank you. Maggie White, I work with I'm a Siri associate who's part of the Vingo constituency, and also with AGWA, which is the Alliance for Global Water and Adaptation. Thank you for this very thorough, complete, overwhelming presentation. It was a lot of information to take in, and if we can come back to you afterwards and we can have the presentation, that would be very helpful to come up with more, I think, concrete and such detailed levels. I mean, as usual, the Secretariat does a great work of background research on the mandate and the work that needs to be done. What I expressed at the Adaptation Committee in September, where we come from, is how do you implement this? This is the COP of implementation. How do we help parties and non-state parties reach the objective of the Paris Agreement? And when I see this and I think of the talks we had around the TEPE, so the technical examination process, also I'm thinking, how can you align these two dynamics together and not have silos in the different working groups? So I'm thinking with the stock in 2018 that we have to do on the NDCs, that the parties have to deliver, maybe we can pick out 2, 3, 4 very strong focus areas for adaptation and work on them to see what the countries are already doing, what are the bottlenecks, what are the difficulties they have in accessing finance, and implementing them, and then come up with a list of recommendations for the other parties. I mean, you are in a strategic position where you dialogue with the parties and with the different financial mechanisms also. So maybe having more of an operational approach to what is being done, where are the difficulties, and reaching that out through what you said, which were peer reviews, case studies, proposals, and having that dialogue and coming out with strong recommendations building up to 2018 when the NDCs have to be reviewed and should be also transformed into NAPs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Note that the presentation will be available online. We will be providing the address for that, but in any case, you can also go to NAP Central and you will get it from there. But we will be providing additional address where you can load the presentation. I see a hand here.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I'm Julio Cordano from the delegation of Chile, from the government of Chile. And although I missed part of the presentation, I think one of the things that were mentioned by Beth in her presentation is something that is really puzzling me from a long time, which is how the convention and the institutional arrangements within the convention can actually relate to other processes outside the convention. Beth mentioned SDGs and the Sendai framework, but there are many other elements that or processes that could be taken into account. And the thing is that looking at this from a national perspective, there are many people involved or engaged at the national level in preparing infrastructure, you know, and water resources, and trying to increase resilience in all these strategic areas for the national development. And somehow there are different groups or task forces for each of these processes, and maybe at the national level, since they are not connected at the international level, at the national level they are also being addressed by different groups. So if at the international level, we in these instances we could find, you know, bridges that could integrate the work that has been done in the SDGs and in other processes, I think would be hugely beneficial for national planning. And I'm thinking, for example, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, if you look at those from the perspective of a person that is familiar with the adaptation processes in the convention, you will see that most of them really can be looked at from an adaptation perspective. If you think about biodiversity and cities and energy, and even in terms of alleviation of poverty and trade, etc., everything can be looked at from the adaptation perspective. So maybe addressing the question where do we see gaps? I don't know if this is a gap, but maybe it's just a task that we need to accomplish at some level. And maybe if I go across the corridor and go to the negotiating rooms, I'm going to find a different answer to this, because there's some reluctance, you know, to have these interlinkages. But I guess it is something that we really need to start thinking about, especially if we consider that the Paris Agreement is going to be it's going to have a very durable and it's going to be applicable in the following decades.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheila. Let me give first the floor to the lady in red there.
It's a nice introduction. So I'm Karin Lexien. I'm the director of Stockholm International, or for the international policy of Stockholm International Water Institute, and I'm also the co-chair of AGWA. So Maggie is really the technical expert here, but I have two more overarching questions to you. Knowing that the Nairobi Work Program also is working on information sharing and so forth, could you, for someone that hasn't been in the corridors for a year, explain a little bit on where your thinkings are, and also relating to what Maggie was saying before on thematic areas, because you have some thematic areas of the Nairobi Work Program. So could that also be an idea for you to look into? And also, of course, linking as CV thinks is really important, building on what you were saying, to link up with other processes. And maybe the SDGs could also serve as inspirations to areas to look into, as it's really important to link, not the least, implementation of NDCs to the implementation of the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I give the floor to Tara Shine?
Thank you. So my name is Tara Shine. I'm Special Advisor to the Mary Robinson Foundation, Climate Justice. Just responding to the third theme, and inspired a little by what Julio and the lady in the red dress said, it seems to me that some measure of the adequacy of adaptation action is the ability to achieve sustainable development. So if we don't achieve the sustainable development, if we don't achieve the 17 sustainable development goals, we will therefore have failed to adapt. And therefore, I think that there must be strong linkages between the sort of the reporting that happens within this process and the reporting that happens under the HLPF for the SDGs. And, you know, it capturing, although it's not easy, but capturing that link, I think, will be important, because I think the same applies to the adequacy of adaptation support. Adaptation support is going to come from a wide range of sources. And again, if we have enough finance flowing and enough investment in resilience building coming from different sources, the measure of success should be that we are able to achieve the SDGs by 2030. And then the final thing is that I think also related to the adequacy is the constant relationship, as really well articulated now in the Paris Agreement, between adaptation and the adequacy of effort on adaptation with the adequacy of effort on mitigation. So adapting to what? Adapting to a 1.52 or 3 degree world, those are very different things, and the adequacy changes so much according to which scenario we're in there. So again, that means that these linkages back to the level of mitigation and ambition and our ability to achieve that, which again we will achieve through the implementation of the SDGs. You know, all of that, complicated though it sounds, is going to have to be, I think, part of the framing. So good luck.
Thank you, Tara. I'll give more two. Then I will request the two groups to respond to those. Then we come to the second round. The lady in blue first.
Thank you very much. My name is Juliana. I'm from Colombia. And thanks for this presentation. It really helps to the discussion we are now having under different agenda items, especially agenda item 4 of the APA on the adaptation communication, where we're having this conversation on what is to communicate, what is to report, whether we should include some forward-looking elements in one vehicle or some backwards elements in another vehicle. So I think it's very important in order for you to fulfill this mandate to be very connected with these conversations and don't like prejudge maybe whether it should be one vehicle or another. But it's important to have these inputs considered. With regards to the issue of the recognition of efforts, we believe that under the convention we have the NATCOMs. We have been including, all parties have NATCOMs, and we have included through the NATCOMs our climate change efforts, both for mitigation and adaptation. So in our view, we should not add additional burdens or duplicate information in other vehicles, since we already have this. And it's true that we need to visualize these efforts in some way. So I think it's very good you presented that this could be connected to the transparency framework and also be an input to the global stocktake. So every 5 years we can see how parties are or what information have they included in their NATCOMs. And then it is our view that the forward-looking elements, what we are going to do, and the priorities and needs that will help us to catalyze action and support should be included in the adaptation communication. Like in a way of not putting everything in one single place, but just sending clear signals of what are we planning to do and of what we did in the past. And we believe this is like the way of recognizing these efforts under the convention. We are planning to present a submission. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to do it for this session, but we will be happy to further elaborate on this issue, and we'll be happy if you can include in those inputs on the vehicles and on how we can recognize these efforts, the NATCOM, as what we had used and what is still alive under the convention. And we believe it's a very useful vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. We will welcome for sure the submissions. We will get there to next steps. Now give the floor to ladies in power first. Huh? One more lady here.
Okay, thank you for your comprehensive presentation. My name is Sanna Vermeulen. I work for a Dutch international NGO, Coordate. And we are very much working on community resilience. So you identified in your presentation the identification of local views. I think this is very much of importance. I don't know if I understand you correctly, but to really use also the views of the community, their inputs and their solutions in building resilience. So that I just want to stress the importance of that. And also to make use of those case studies that are there already in the world, to use those on this community resilience to access climate funds and to include their input in the adaptation plans in the countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see some more hands. Yes, we will come to you. We will come to Men's in Power soon. Let me just ask the two groups first to respond, and then we get to our stage. May I give the floor to Beth?
Sure. So thank you very much for all those interventions. I noticed some were questions, some were comments, and we appreciate both. I did make notes, and hopefully I captured the essence of them. So in terms of the first one I've written down here, did we spend much time, or have we talked a lot about how to define adaptation, what adaptation is? My short answer, and Min Peng may have another one, is that no, we didn't. The Paris Agreement and decisions under the National Adaptation Plans, they do define what parties have agreed adaptation in very general terms is. So we didn't think it was necessary to spend a lot of time trying to refine that any further, because I'm not sure that we would have actually been able to. As you all know, it's a reporting on adaptation and action on adaptation is very country driven. So there has to be some flexibilities for countries to self-determine what they consider adaptation to the impacts of climate change to be. The second one I noted was a suggestion to maybe, how this particular activity, or how can we here help parties to implement on adaptation, if I understood that particular question comment correctly, and maybe to pick out 3 or 4 focus areas on adaptation and really focus on those. In terms of the 3 mandates that we've been given, and the the reason for this particular side event feedback on those mandates, I can see that there is a linkage. I think that might be an appropriate way of working for either the Nairobi Work Program or the committee or the leg. I mean, the work we do on the leg does tend to focus very, very much on the challenges, specific challenges countries are having, particularly on their national adaptation plan. So we do work with them directly on those kinds of things, which is a little bit separate from the specific things that we were talking to you about here today. The third one on how the convention can link better to to other other things that are happening outside the convention, and that has been a challenge for a little while. I think we're better at it than we were, and at least there's a recognition that there is a world outside of this process, and there are efforts, as you know, under Nairobi Work Program to link to some of those other efforts. And I do appreciate the comment that it is very difficult. We have the same issue. We're dealing on adaptation and we're dealing on disaster risk reduction, and it's hard to break down those silos. And if there are things that we can do better at the international level to break that down, that would also help. And maybe there are things we can do in both groups to help break those down. The fourth one I took note of was that Nairobi Work Program is also working on interlinkages on adaptation, and maybe we could also work along those themes. I think that might relate more closely to the other mandate that was given to the Adaptation Committee to look at the institutional arrangements and how under the convention and how the adaptation institutions work better or could work better together. The fifth one, that about the strong links to the SDGs and all of that, I very much agree. And thank you for that feedback and your wish of luck for us to do that. I think it's a challenge for all of us to sort of make sure we're working on all of those fronts. Because indeed, we won't make progress on one side without making progress on a whole bunch of other things. I have two more notes here before I'll pass over to Min Peng. So the sixth one I have related to the adaptation communications. Oh, the discussion under the APA on adaptation communications, which I'm familiar with. That they're, my notes are scribbly now here at the bottom of the page. That they not, several things like they not be in this not incorporate an additional burden or apply additional burden. And that we take on board your comment that these all things need to be connected. So the work we're doing under the joint AC leg mandates need to be connected both to the conversations under the APA on communications and the transparency framework. So thank you for that feedback. It's noted. And then in terms of incorporating local views in measuring the effectiveness and that third mandate that we have, effectiveness of adaptation. I also appreciate that feedback to look into some of those case studies that are existing. So, Min Peng.
Yes, Min Peng.
Thank you, Beth. Actually, I think those questions are very difficult questions and very challenging for us to answer all of them. But I can try to address them. But if we also have colleagues here, maybe they also want to address some of them. For what is adaptation is actually we do not spend time to discuss this, and we follow the guidance by the IPCC, and we believe this is a country-driven process. And so I think it's very difficult for AC or LAG to give very specific definition what adaptation is. So I think we will follow the common sense and the definition, the science, and based on the best science. So I think this is the question we want to address. And about and also I would like to address the question about the should we identify what the difficulties and something like that. We did do some peer review and desk review on the 3 mandates, but we found it the most difficult, the most challenging for us it's the information available for the 3 mandates are very, very limited. And so that's why we are here and hope you can provide us more information on the issues. And for the linkages between the convention, SDG, and Sendai framework, actually at our 10th meeting in Bonn in September, there are some members and NGOs address this question to AC and think we should put adaptation in a big context of sustainable development and disaster prevention. But still, we have not yet agree on this issue, but we already opened this discussion. We think it's very useful discussion to put forward to identify the possible linkages between the convention and other important framework. And for the Nairobi work program and the AC and LAIC, I think this question is well addressed by Beth. We are going to have the institutional adaptation-related institutional review in 2017, and also we call for submission on this issue. And if you could provide that idea how we can enhance the coherence between different institutions, you are very welcome to provide your input to our secretariat. And for the how to include the resilience, how to reflect the local views in adaptation. Actually, maybe our work on technical examination process would address this better, because in our main session we have some discussion on how to include the resilience and the local view, and I think this will be very important part of adaptation. And I think this is but I'm so far I do not have very clear how to incorporate those good ideas into our current joint AC-LAG mandates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ming-Peng. Colleagues from LAG and AC, do you want to touch on something which colleagues here didn't touch? Klaus?
Thank you. I feel your questions are very relevant, but what we provided is a very high-level abstract information to you. We did not provide any detailed options, and I feel your questions can be much better considered when you have a detailed option in front of you. And I feel what we would like to get is practical options, how you want to reflect, how do you want to see those tasks addressed so that they meet your needs. That would be very helpful. We only received input, more specific input, from 5 parties, I suggest, and we received only from a limited amount of organizations input. And the more input we receive, the richer and broader will be the options that will be presented. We are not a negotiation body. We would not distill out of those options the very one option you would like to get. This is not our task. We will prepare options that reflect the input from you, and this will be done at the end of next year. And then it is up to the parties, once they receive those options with the pros and cons, and they can provide further guidance on that basis, how they want to see implemented those tasks under the Paris Agreement. And you know, we received, what we received already is also available on the web page of the UNFCCC, and you can see what those countries that provided specific input, like Turkey and those is European Union, United States, what their thinking is. And I encourage you to look into those details, because there are quite comprehensive submissions, so that you get a better idea what the thinking is and where you see a need to add something, so that it is reflected, and we could then have a richer options document, and it helps us to, the discussion. It's an iterative process. Therefore, I encourage you to also look at those submissions, study them, and encourage additional submissions when you have reflected on those, in order to, with respect to those questions, where you see gaps and where you see a need to go add something into the document. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. I'll now open the second round of questions. Give the floor to gentleman in the back there.
Yes, thank you. I'm Bert van Loon. I'm from the Belgium delegation, and I'd like to share some views on behalf of the European Union on this issue. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the work that's already been undertaken. Both the EC and LAG and their members have clearly already put a lot of work into this. And it's, I'd just like to make a few general remarks. As regards the areas of further work, I think it's important to have, first of all, a common understanding of some of the elements that are part of these mandates, such as we need to find a common understanding for the recognition of efforts. What is a recognition of efforts, and how do we approach this? And in fact, the same goes for other concepts, such as the adequacy and the effectiveness, etc. I think it would be important to have a common understanding of these issues. Now, further on, as was already mentioned also by several interventions here, these mandates, they are closely linked to the work that is being undertaken and the negotiations under APA on the global stocktake and also on transparency. And so therefore it would be important to, in future work, to reflect on the progress that is being made under those negotiations into the work that is being done here. We think that is very important. And then finally, I also would like to share with you that we agree with what was being said by Julio and by Tara, that the link to the SDGs is clearly very important. And it would be essential when developing, for example, approaches for assessing the adequacy and the effectiveness to look at the work that is being done under other international bodies. And therefore, as Klaus already mentioned, it would be essential for multilateral organizations, international organizations, and other stakeholders to also make submissions on their work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One here in front. There is a gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Charles Nyandiga, and I work for the UNDP GF Small Grants Program. I just wanted to follow up on the submission that was made by the Finance Committee, particularly on the area of tracking on adaptation flaws, adaptation financing flaws. Given that I know certain funding facilities, for example, the GCF now has made some kind of commitments in terms of the proportions that they are going to fund in terms of mitigation and adaptation, it becomes logical that I think tracking of these resources, both at the global level, at the national, and at local level becomes very, very important in terms of seeing how much of these resources actually do end up being for adaptation or mitigation. So my question is the Adaptation Committee considering methodologies that they can actually discuss with governments or other bilateral partners on how this can actually be, tracked on a methodology that can be agreed universally, that can be adopted, and a system that we can use to be able to, authoritatively say this is what is happening at the global level and at the national level. I know there's some governments that have tried to do this. For example, Nepal has a good coding system in terms of national financing that is going into adaptation. But then when it comes to the local level, tracking processes, this becomes very challenging because most of the times the adaptation actions are actually implemented by NGOs and not necessarily government. How do you relate all these, parties and actors and the tracking processes within this mechanism? Is this something that the Adaptation Committee has thought through? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Do I have any more? Not? If not, okay. If not, I will give the floor again, starting with Mimpeng.
I see a lot of expectation for adaptation committee actually. I think Klaus have that the adaptation committee is a technical advisory body, which we can take note what is happening on the APA negotiation, and actually at the ninth meeting of our ninth meeting, when we began to discuss the Paris mandate, we found it's very, very difficult to achieve a common understanding of the elements and the concepts. So basically, we're a technical body, so we try our best to avoid the political divergence within our committee, because for some of the concepts, as you have said, what the effectiveness, what is the adequacy, and what is something that, yes, there has not yet common understanding for these concepts. But I think we, regardless of those definitions, we have to begin our work, and our work is to provide options, as Klaus have said, and it's the negotiator's responsibility to choose between them and to agree on something which you think comfortable with. And for the question about how to keep track of the financial things, I think this is also very challenging work for us. And what we can do is to enhance the cooperation and collaboration with other constituted bodies under the convention, and also outside the convention. For example, actually, our meeting is open to observers, and every time we try our best to invite the people from SCF and GCF and also UNDP, UNEP to attend our meeting, which make us to know more about what is going on the financial issue, what is going on the adaptation on the ground. So I think we are rely on those information inputs, other constituted bodies, parties, and the UN organizations and all NGOs can provide for us. For us, we only have 16 people, and we cannot to keep track of those information by ourselves. So we rely on the outside input on this information. So that's why we will we will hold some events, and for example, the adaptation forum, the side event, and also other kind of events to approach to them and to obtain more information to facilitate our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Min-Peng. Beth, somewhat?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but to the first question from the gentleman from the EU, one of our tasks is to come to a sort of a common understanding or propose a common understanding, which was the elements in our mandates, and that was further back in the slide. So once you get, I think we're posting this presentation on the website. So once you see those, and getting feedback from you is an important way for us to know if we're on the right track, or if you have different views, or as I'm sure everyone in the room is aware, many of these mandates and these understandings are very open to a wide range of interpretations. So the challenge we have is to sort of gather those wide views and make some recommendations on back to the parties on what they might want to discuss more. But I won't comment on the work of the Adaptation Committee and if those particular tracking methodologies is in their work plan. But I do know within the LEG, while it's not in our work plan, one of the things that we do is organize and organize the NAP Expo, and that while it's not a specific element of our work plan to look at those particular things like tracking yet anyway, the NAP Expo does provide a forum for countries like Nepal and others who have done that kind of work to come and present their work, and through those kinds of forums we can facilitate the exchange of some kind of emerging practices that may not be in the purview of our very limited work plans, but we can facilitate that exchange between countries of sort of emerging practices.
Thank you, Beth. Clifford from Adaptation Committee. Can I have the mic to Clifford?
Thank you very much, Chair, and let me thank
you can stand so that everybody can see you.
Let me thank you for the questions. They are very interesting questions. However, this is a joint LEG AC initiative, and I think some of the questions that are posed are specifically for the AC. So as an AC member, I'll try to answer from that perspective. I fully agree that there's no way we're going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals if we don't address adaptation. That's a given, and that point was made in the earlier questions. But with respect to how we go about doing this, it will require linkages, and linkages were asked about also in the first question, particularly in the Nairobi Work Program. And the Adaptation Committee, we have a number of task forces that we have established for specific areas of work. And we try to have on those task forces representatives from the relevant bodies inside and outside of the convention as the work that is required is being undertaken. The AC though, work is based on the mandate given by the COP. So what is it that we focus on is based on what the COP decisions are, and the COP decisions are formulated by parties, of course, as you are fully aware. The question of tracking, I think that's an interesting one, and it is what I think we'll have to look at. There's other methodologies where actually, I think this falls under the monitoring and evaluation that is mandated for us to look at the determined methodology and see how parties can actually achieve that. And certainly I know the tool that has from Nepal is one that we've heard about, and we, as answered by Beth, we'll see how best we can use that tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Clifford. May I put on spot Adrian?
I think it's getting quite late, so I won't add too much. I suppose the big issue for us when we're looking at it in the LEG and the Adaptation Committee is, how do you deal with that third mandate? How do you really measure adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support? And while that can maybe won't work very well at a particular local level where you're trying to adapt a piece of infrastructure in a community or something like that. How do you aggregate that to the provincial level or the district levels or the national levels? And again, how do you aggregate it into international frameworks? And I think that's the big challenge for us. And maybe I like the idea of looking at the SDGs and looking at some of the indicators that might come out of that side as well. So when you're thinking about your submissions, please, we would like you to, you know, highlight and bring in there some information, some ideas that might be really useful to this report. And I won't go on any further. I'll thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. Colleagues, is there any person which would like to take a last-minute question? Klaus? Be quick.
A very quick question, because there was, I don't know whether many have realized that an important event in Rabat at the end of September. And the task of this event was to look whether on the metrics for adaptation. And there was really a very prominent presenters from the World Bank, from other development banks, and from various perspectives, more than 30 presentations. And the outcome of this discussion was that there is not one metrics for adaptation. And I feel that's a given reality, which makes it not easier, our task, but what is a given issue, you know. And I would like that you don't have the expectation that our mandate can deliver this egg of the Columbus, we say, where we can come forward with such agreement. This is not our task and will not happen. This is very unlikely. So our approach, therefore, will have to be so flexible that all those different approaches that have been developed in various countries by various agencies can be found again in a coherent manner in the framework that we try to deliver. That's therefore the request for input, so that we get all the breadth that is required in order to meet the needs of all that provide information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Klaus. Colleagues, as I did announce from the beginning, this is an interim stage of our work, our joint work, which means that we will continue. This is one step, and we others to go. On that, I'm glad to announce that we will be requesting, continue requesting your feedback by January. It's better if you can do it now that there is a momentum for that. But because we very much like your inputs, we are giving until January so that parties, non-parties, stakeholders can provide feedback to our joint work. And this can be done throughout a working group email, which is in the board. The two emails, one for LAC and one for AC, are open 24 by 24 hours. Please direct your contributions to them. Based on your feedback and additional submissions, our two groups will be prepared a paper outlining initial options to be considered during AC lag meeting that will be taking place in March. There are not that much time. Your comments so that we put together a paper and then we will discuss that paper in the beginning of March. Then we hope to have a final draft published ahead of SB 46, which likely to happen in May 2017 for parties' feedback and general feedback. Then we're going to have recommendations to be finalized by our two groups in collaboration with a standing committee on finance, as the mandate says. And then we hope that in 2017 this paper should be addressed by CMA at the margins of COP23 that will likely to happen in November 2017. If you want to track the progress, you want more interaction with any one of us, you are welcome to do so. And all the contributions, submissions, including the presentation that Beth made this afternoon, will be posted in AC lag webpage, which got the name of UNFCCC.int/9785, which is in the board. You can access it also in specific portal information of AC. You can access also progress in NAP Central, as I've been saying, but for this joint work, there is a joint web page that the information can be accessed. And these colleagues bring us to the end of our consultation during COP22. We thank very much for all contributions, and they were really fruitful contributions that we got today. We hope to continue having them until, as I refer, until January. But to keep momentum, if some can be delivered even during COP22, will be good. But if not, if you want to consult parties at home, have time until January, and then we will be keeping announcing the progress of work. Actually, the progress can be tracked on that web page, and then for us to deliver our work on first CMA that will likely to be at COP23 in November 2017. Colleagues, if you have any issue of clarifications, we do have the two emails there for AC and LAG. You can address, you clarify. We will glad to clarify whatever issues that you may wish to raise. and see you. Thank you for all your contributions. Questo.